I think the largest focus in leadership consultancy and coaching and mentorship today is the conversation about Generation Z. I think it's misplaced, but it is a large conversation. And that conversation is, well, they don't want to work so hard, or they just want to take time off, or they don't have the same inspiration of. And I think not only is it a hot topic, but it's one that I think can be laid to rest fairly quickly if you go back to the basics of leadership. As I said earlier, my definition is seeing the unique value and worth in every individual so powerfully they see it themselves. That doesn't matter whether they're 20 years old or they're 60 years old.
Ty Aldinger's remarkable journey from the military to the corporate realm spans nearly 32 years and is marked by unwavering dedication to leadership and impact. As the president and owner of Aldi Consulting, he has spent the past decade guiding senior executives in both business management and life leadership. Despite retiring as a captain, Ty's naval career included notable roles such as lieutenant commander on the USS Enterprise, showcasing his leadership prowess and his commitment to service to our country. Transitioning into senior executive positions at Lockheed Martin and BAE Systems in Hawaii, Ty leveraged over 30 years of experience in leadership, coaching, counseling, and consulting to empower individuals and organizations. As a certified Covey leadership facilitator, Ty excels in fostering authenticity, shaping shared visions, and instilling accountability, driving transformative change in his community and beyond. Beyond his professional achievements, Ty's active involvement in community organizations such as Malama Manoa, the U.S. Naval Academy Alumni Association, and the UCC Church of the Crossroads reflects his commitment to making a lasting impact. Join us today as we unravel the fingerprints of success on Ty Aldinger. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. This is Bill Barrett with Fingerprints on Success, and today my guest is Ty Aldinger. Ty, how are you?
I am, if I could have any better, Bill, you'd have to bottle me up and sell me over the common mark. Thanks a lot for enjoying you.
There might be a market for that, so we may take you up on that. So for our listeners, Ty, I wanted to start by talking about one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on the show, one of the many reasons. But today, I really want to talk about leadership. And, people, I want them to hear about your background as someone who dedicated a huge part of your life to service to our country, elevating to the point of being a captain in the United States Navy. And I'd like you to tell us about that journey. But I really, today, I'm excited to talk about leadership because leadership, from what I've seen in all the years of representing entrepreneurs, to be able to run an organization, build an organization, it's virtually impossible if there's not tremendous leadership from the top. So I'm super excited for our conversation today. And I thought maybe one of the places we could start was maybe walking us through your journey a little bit and kind of give people a little bit of background on your story.
Good. Well, thanks, Bill. I think it is a good place to start. If you look at entrepreneurship in general or business organization, there's one commonality, and that commonality is leadership. It's an oft abused term, but the reality is that it's what makes a success in a business or in a family or in a company or in a community. My journey started, came up during early part of the Vietnam War. I came out of a small public high school in New York, just north of New York City, and always felt a sense of service, whether it was community service or Boy Scouts or, athletics at school. I applaud me. I came from a family that was purely middle class. We never owned a home. I lived in a 700 square foot apartment in the suburbs of New York. But back in the early 50s and 60s, that sense of purpose and community and the vestiges of World War II were still there. So I always knew I wanted to serve. I love the ocean. I applied only to the Naval Academy, although at that time, many people were applying to West Point for the U.S. Military Academy, or out at in Colorado Springs for the Air Force Academy. But I wanted to be in the Navy, and I was very blessed to be able to be picked up. It was interesting. I wore glasses from sixth grade, and this was during Vietnam, and we were losing a lot of pilots. And so the academies, particularly the Naval Academy, wouldn't take you unless you were 2020. And so, because as you went through 4 years of academic institution, many people ended up wearing glasses. It decreased the number of folks who could get in the cockpit, put on an oxygen mask, and fly a plane. I got in very late in the game. 2 weeks before my high school graduation, I got if you remember the old Western Union telegrams, I got a telegram, and it said, "You have cleared as the number one alternate for New England. You have 24 hours to decide whether you are going to go to the Naval Academy."
Wow.
And
24
again,
hours. They gave you a whole 24
it.
hours. Okay.
24 hours. And it was a tough time because it was right toward we're just after the Tet Offensive. It's 1969. We're moving into 1970. And I would suggest that college campuses and high schools, in fact, were not so pro-military at that time. So I said absolutely yes. And interestingly, at my high school graduation, all of my classmates were wearing peace doves on their matriculation caps and gowns. And at the end of the ceremony, the Navy had sent a senior Navy captain to come give me my high school diploma. So I was probably the only one out of the maybe 200 graduates that wasn't wearing a peace dove, and walked up to the stand and did my first salute, not in uniform, to a Navy captain to graduate from high school. So that's where my journey started. And I thought maybe after Vietnam, it would be 5 years and do something else. Well, you know my story. 32 years later, I was still trying to figure out when I grew up, what I was going to do when I grew up.
Well, that is quite a a story in terms of putting things in the time perspective too, about when you grew up and came of age, and not exactly an easy decision to make at that point in your life, I'm sure.
No, I think that those we'll talk a little bit about as we go through the conversation today. But it's one of the pieces of leadership is not making decisions when the decisions are easy, but making decisions when they are tough.
Yeah. When I'm sure some of the ones that you had to make are some of probably the toughest, and probably a lot harder than our average entrepreneur faces in a day. Give me a little bit of the story too, on how you segued from your life and service to what you're currently doing, and tell us a little bit about how you're helping entrepreneurs today.
Yeah, I'll start from the back end forward. I run a small consultancy where I'm working on, and it's all based on leadership. Who would have known? Ensign 101 in 1969 or 1970 would be such a marketable and needed commodity in the business world today. Certainly not I. But my little group basically works with entrepreneurs to develop their leadership, how to run a meeting, how to read a P&L, how to understand how people are motivated or demotivated. Because of the military experience, when I got out, I retired after 32 years, I said, and I went right into defense and aerospace. So I carried some of our tighter national clearances. So I had a lot of access to classified material. And I started with a small software house in Hawaii, who was working on some special software for the submarine community. And we did pretty well. We doubled the size of that small company from about 25 people up to about 60 folks, and took it into the multi-million dollars. And we got observed by Lockheed Martin, and we got bought. I got bought by the Lockheed Martin Corporation, and they put a set of golden handcuffs on me and said I wasn't doing anything until I continued to lead the company for a couple of years, which I did. And then, I wasn't looking for another job, and another large aerospace company in Hawaii, their chief executive passed away due to a heart attack. And the company was being run from New York, and you know the difference between Jersey and New York, and you can imagine the difference between New York and Hawaii. And my parent corporation's headquarters was in London. So running a multi-million-dollar company in Hawaii from New York or London was virtually, it was a losing game. So I got picked up to run another defense and aerospace company in Hawaii, and I did that for another 5 or 6 years. So for about a little over a decade, 10 or 12 years, I had senior leadership positions, the senior leadership positions for two multinational corporations in Hawaii. Seeing that I didn't need to retire again, but always having this calling, this ability to impact other people's lives. It's not a job; it's a calling. I hung up my spurs and thought maybe I'd take a little chance to enjoy the 50th state. And that lasted all of about 9 months. And I started this small consultancy in leadership after being asked by the head of the Carpenters Union in Hawaii to get involved. And that grew to, 30 some odd clients, hiring other folks to be part of the team. And I couldn't have had a more interesting or pleasurable journey.
So I have a question, and I think it ties really to everything. When you think about military service, when you think about running companies, leading people, convincing people to listen to you, maybe it's a simple question, but I think probably for most of our listeners, maybe a profound one, which is, how does a leader get people to follow them?
Powerful question. There's many ways. There's many there's many ways to get into leadership. There's positional power. I'm the president. There's organizational power. I'm a department head of a large company. There is personality power. I can convince and cajole. The real power of leadership comes from moral leadership, from character leadership, from doing what you say you're going to do leadership. And that doesn't matter whether you're in the military or frankly, or if you're running a company. I'll give you an example. Just a sea story, and we learned from our from our mentors. But I had a department head. I was a young lieutenant, maybe just I was a lieutenant at the time, and my department head was a commander, and he came in guns ablazing. He wanted to do X and Y and Z and kind of turn things. This wasn't shipboard. I was in a shore command in Hawaii at the time. The part that I learned most from him was a sign that he put up behind his desk immediately upon assuming his departmental position. And it said, and I quote, "Remember the golden rule, colon, he who has the gold rules." And of course, in the military, we're a hierarchical structure. And read my collar devices, right?
That's right.
and what did I learn from that? I learned that wasn't moral authority. That wasn't character leadership. That wasn't how to get people to do something. That was more like read my collar. I could tell in 30 seconds, Bill, as I became a senior officer, whether a young sailor was calling me sir because of my eagles on my collar, or whether he knew I cared about him or his family or the people around him or his shipmates. I'm going to share you with some sea stories today, and I hope that doesn't take the conversation too far afield. I deployed on an aircraft carrier. This is back now, probably 20 years ago, and we knew it was going to be a long deployment. It was scheduled to be a 7-month deployment. It turned out to be a 9-month deployment. And this is not like going to the office. You're gone for 9 months. Your spouse and significant others run the family. Back then, there was no internet. There was no email. You'd send the letter and you'd have to number it because you hope that the letter that said somebody died didn't get there before somebody with a letter that said somebody just got promoted. I had this young sailor who I knew his wife was severely pregnant. She was going to give birth within 3 months. And I also knew that we were scheduled to be pulling into the Philippines about the time that she was ready to give birth. And so I went to the skipper, the captain of the ship, and I said, hey, said it's not common to let sailors go on leave or liberty on deployment. I'm asking for a special pull here. This young man, he was all of 20 years old, 21 years old, maybe, first child, wife in a town that she had never lived in before, not a lot of associates. I want to give him a chance to go home. And I said, I know we got another port call in 3 weeks. I've got the watch bill all set away. People are going to cover his duty. And I want to give him a chance to get home and be at the birth of his first child. Captain looked at me like I had three heads, but eventually relented, I think is the proper word. And that young man went home and saw the birth of his first child. What do you think that sense of leadership and that sense of commitment, when he called me sir, I knew what it was for? Does that make any sense?
Well, it makes total sense. It makes total sense because I think that people in general, they sense sincerity and whether something is real or not. And I think that I always say this about clients. People will say, oh, how do you build a successful firm or successful practice, successful business, whatever you want to call it. And I always say that clients get whether you have a passion for their cause and for them or not, whether you're just whether you're just handling the matter or pushing the paper or writing the brief or whatever it is in my universe, they know whether you're taking it up like it's your own business or your own cause and you feel passionately about it or you don't. And you don't, doesn't matter what you tell them or how you say it or whatever. They know it instinctively. People are way smarter, in my view, than they're given credit for.
Amen.
So yeah, what you're saying completely resonates with me. And that's an example of leadership internal in an organization. It could apply to anything that you're doing in life. Are you real or not? And when is your moral compass set in the right direction or not?
Yeah, great word. Great word. Again, another sailor story. And again, I'm going to digress a little bit, but it's about leadership. I had another sailor, now a more senior sailor, who was had a problem with the bottle. Most good sailors had been fired at least once or twice. This young man had been busted or reduced in grade, reduced in rank already once in his career. And he missed getting underway with us one time. We're supposed to get underway at 6 o'clock in the morning, and he didn't make it to the ship, which is a crime that's punishable by a lot. And he was a great sailor. I mean, by great, I mean, this kid, we could give him anything and he would do it with passion and purpose. And he was smart and intelligent and he had followers. And this was one of those probably should end his career kind of things. I went to the department at this time, not to the captain. I said, I'd like to give him one more chance. And again, this was a tough sell because, we're underway. We need this kind of support. And make this short story a little far longer than it needs to be, but this young sailor was confined to the ship. We didn't throw him out of the Navy, got him into AA. And at the end of the story, not only did he successfully finish his tour on that ship, but he eventually became a Master Chief Petty Officer, the highest enlisted grade in the Navy. And I want to think that tough decision made back when we could have said, you're not fit, not only changed his life, but the hundreds and hundreds of sailors' lives and people's lives that he touched in the future.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to see and understand what people have to offer too. And that sometimes that's a dramatic story, obviously, based on the fact that it happened in military service. But even in companies, sometimes you have that employee who's lost their way, but they're really good, really smart, really capable. And you can either dispose of people or try to find a way to create a path forward for them to be successful. And that may require mentorship. It may require taking them under your wing and figuring out a way to help them along. But great, as the saying goes, really good people are hard to find. And when you have someone who you know has all the potential, maybe having to be able to, the ability to see it, and B, the ability to maybe figure out how to solve their problem for them. It's powerful in all aspects of life, and certainly in business as well. So let me ask you this question, because I think this will be fun for our listeners to hear too. We love to talk on this podcast about guiding principles, because there seems to often be interesting, often common threads among entrepreneurs when they reflect on their journeys, certain guiding principles that they think led to their success in business, to their success in leadership, whatever it is. When you reflect on your career, and it could be from your service to private business to anything, when you reflect, do you have any guiding principles or kind of philosophies that you think have made all the difference when you reflect?
Yeah, I think that we've kind of started to touch on some of them about the basic tenets of leadership, and that is, you need to be real. We use the term walking our talk. Say one thing and do something else. And how long will you be in a respected leadership position? So I think I like your term, the moral compass, great book many years ago. And I think that keeping a moral compass is absolutely critical. Now, that doesn't mean, I don't want to refer to it as whether you go to church or what your spiritual background is, but it does mean knowing who you are and creating a trusting environment. People always say, trust is the most important part of leadership. And we might talk a little bit later about one of my mentors. I had a chance to get to know Stephen Covey very well, and one of his things was, he says, a challenge about trust is we always think it's out there. We always think he doesn't trust me, she doesn't trust me, they don't trust us. The reality is there's a step before trust, somebody trusting you. And that is for us individually to be trustworthy. And I think if there was a common trait, whether it's military leadership, and by the way, that's an oxymoron. There's no such thing as military leadership. I mean, yes, we're wearing a uniform, but leadership is leadership. And it comes from character. It comes from developing trust. It comes from a commitment to the people that are around you. I love, and I think Stephen may have keyed this word, but it's my definition that I own as well about what leadership really is. There's thousands of definitions, thousands of books that are written about it. But leadership, in my view, is the ability to see the unique value and worth of an individual so powerfully that they see it in themselves. When you do that, you've created a great company. I mean, take a look at your journey in Mandelbaum Barrett. I mean, and how many, what are you up to? 70, 80? I've given up the number of lawyers you've got on the team.
109, but I'm not counting.
There you go. And you want to talk about a scaling problem, or you want to talk about a hiring problem, or you want to talk about an opportunity for finding the right fits. If you didn't have the right character and lead, I'll use the military term, leading from the front. If you weren't walking your talk, your business would not be what it is today. It's a treasure to watch and see how Mandelbaum Barrett has grown, how it has expanded its portfolio, and more than that, how the people that have been associated with it have prospered, not just in their pocketbook, but in their relationships.
Well, thank you. I thank you for that, and that coming from you, it means a lot. I would always say thank you to anyone who said it, but it really does mean a lot coming from you. So of course you always have to ask the question, the opposite, right? Because no one gets to high levels of success in any aspect of life and says, yeah, when I reflect on the journey, it was just all perfect. Every step along the way, I nailed it. I never made a mistake. I have no regrets. I have no philosophies I had that turned out to be wrong philosophies. Um, I'm pretty sure I've never met anyone that fits that bill. So what are some of the things when you think back you wouldn't do, or philosophies you had that weren't great, and that you would tell people listening, here's the stuff along the way, that maybe some stories where, yeah, this was not the way to go.
I think the focus on um, others early in my career. I needed to um, we didn't we became too self-absorbed, and I didn't rely on others. I didn't delegate well. I felt like I think one of the real critical things is when you think you know everything. You know, you run a large organization. That doesn't mean you know everything in the organization, but you certainly have some awareness of what's going on in the organization. And I think where I probably could have picked up earlier in my career was being more understanding of those other that I didn't have to do everything. I didn't have to salute and take the watch. Delegation is the most powerful part of a leader's job. That doesn't mean you abrogate. It doesn't mean that you give up. It doesn't mean that you blame. The worst leaders I've seen are the ones that take all the credit and push all the blame. The great leaders are the ones that push all the credit and take all the blame. How do you like that? So I think that would be an area, and it took me a long time to pick up on that. And when I saw it, it changed my mind, not only about leadership, but about relationships, about creating culture, about creating strategy, about developing a business that runs on its own. Now, you don't want to think about it this way, but Bill, you've created a business that if you decide to take 2 months off, it's going to do just fine.
Well, we may have to have a therapy session after this together so that you can convince me of that. And you're probably right, by the way. But like most people, that's almost like leaving a child behind.
Yeah, I know. I got you.
It's hard. Yeah, the one thing I think it's similar. It lines up with what you're saying is you never want to be the smartest person in the room, and some of the worst. I'll just say it: worst people. They could be clients, they could be coworkers, they could be anything. The worst people are the ones who always think they're the smartest person in the room, and they have all the answers. What one of the most annoying people I ever knew was their favorite words were "I know." The only thing they knew how to say was "I know."
I
You try
know.
to say everything, and they it could be everything from a legal topic to a business topic to there was this interesting store on Route 80 that I passed by. I know, I know, I know. I like, so anyway, I maybe I digress, but you made me think about it while you were talking about.
No, and it's harder. It's harder the higher you get in the echelon of the organization. I ran the Hawaii group of this international aerospace company, and beautiful, huge office. Look, on the 23rd floor of the First Hawaiian Bank building, looking out over Diamond Head. I had a koa table 15 feet long that just beautifully hand hewn that I could, bring the department heads around and have big meetings. And the first time when I took over the job, of course, the end seat at the end of this beautiful table was waiting for the boss. And I sat there for a while and we had a meeting, and I went a couple of weeks with these meetings going the way they were. And everybody was expecting that's positional power. You're sitting at the end of the table. And I would commend to you, if you haven't already done it in one of your senior staff meetings, one of these days, show up early and sit in the middle of the table. Watch what happens. The dialogue changes. The what's wrong with this picture changes. And it gets to that issue of, I'm just part of this family, right?
Are people afraid to sit in the empty chair?
Oh yeah, and then it's less who's going to sit at the empty chair, right? And so I would make a passion of moving around. Every couple of weeks I'd sit in a different chair. Or here's another leadership thing that I'm sure you do, and it's harder with a large organization. Lead by walking around. I have my executive secretary set up every Friday, and I didn't know. I tried to move it around in different parts of the day, but set up a different time. I wouldn't tell the department where I was going, but here's what I would do. I would make sure that I knew some certain thing about one of the team members. And I had at this point, this segment of the organization had about 100 and some odd people in it. So it wasn't that large, but I'd find out some little specific. Joe down in interior communications, his son just joined the softball league, or was accepted at Purdue University or whatever. And I'd make sure that in that walking around that week, I'd find Joe and say, "Hey, heard about your son. You must be so proud." That kind of connection, particularly as you run larger organizations. I mean, my last organization, the Navy, I had almost 2,000 people in it. Started in Diego Garcia in the middle of the Indian Ocean, all the way back to Fallon, Nevada. The only thing I was good at was acquiring frequent flyer miles on United Airlines. But that sense of knowing your people, no matter how far away they were, and catching them doing something right, lights a fire. Just lights a fire.
No, it's a great piece of advice. And I'm always trying to remind myself of it, because I think sometimes human nature too, when you're busy, is you'll go through peaks and valleys with your connection to people. And when an organization gets big, and I know a lot of our listeners are entrepreneurs who have, very large companies, finding ways to continually connect with your people, and for the sole purpose of that you really want to connect with your people, that it's important, and that you care. I know that you didn't do it, and I don't do it, and others don't do it, so that they can appear to be connected. You actually want to be connected. And I think that it's really important. I mean, we've gotten now to where when you add lawyers and staff, I think we're like 216 people right now. And not huge, but not easy to really be tuned in to what's going on with everybody. And sometimes what your inclination is, I think, is you spend time talking to the people sometimes that for a lot of years. I've been part of my organization for 25 years. There's people that I've known for the entire 25 years. God bless us, we have a great retention rate, and there's, so that it's kind of comfortable because they know you when you were just getting started and you were, wet behind the ears and just figuring it out, and you have a relationship because of time. So one of the challenges is to try to foster relationships with people that you don't know as well, and especially when the organization is growing and growing. So recently I've started going back to putting little breakfast meetings together. And maybe you can't meet individually with every person, but maybe you can have breakfast with 7 or 8 people at a time, and work your way through 200 and some odd people. But that you could feel relationships with people, because I think at the end of the day, even after the pandemic, and even with technology and all the things that we have going on, you have, the human connection and relationships is really still what it's all about. And along those lines, with human connections and relationships, I would love to talk to you, and maybe more so you than most people, about mentors. I have to believe that in the experience that you've had, there must have been some very special people along the way that when you reflect back, you say, my life may not have ended up anywhere near as great as it has had I not had this person in my life or these persons in my life.
Yeah, I think, I've listened to many of your shows before, and I'll parrot some other conversation in that we all start with our parents as part of our mentorship. I mean, again, I came from a very barely middle class family. My dad was a dyed in the wool Philadelphia Methodist, uh, never drank, never smoked, and but he was a steady, kind, competent, empathetic, and frankly, funnier than sin uh, human being. My mom, on the other hand, a good Irish Catholic from New York. And if the day didn't start with a martini at 5 o'clock, it wasn't a day. And so from my dad, I got that sense of consistency and constancy and character and purpose. And from my mom, I got love of life and jump off the diving board. There will be water, even if you don't see the pool. So those two things were real character developers for me. Equally so, I was mentioning earlier that I had a really unique opportunity to meet with Dr. Covey early, well, sort of late in my career, it was the late 80s, early 90s. And the Navy was trying to bring in some civilian leadership compendiums into the Navy. And so a few of us got selected to be credentialed inside what back then was the Covey Leadership Center activity. And I got picked to go with about, I think it was just a dozen of us executives to go on a retreat in Sundance, Utah, with Dr. Covey and a couple of the senior staff. And beautiful facility, gorgeous weekend. And first thing that happened is we got snowed in. I mean, just totally snowed in. So I got to spend, 4 or 5 days with, at that point, we didn't know the word leadership guru, but that's what he turned out to be. And to watch not only how he dealt with his senior executives, but how empathic, what a powerful listener he was. And he came into the whole Covey leadership compendium came in right at the right part in my life when I was, I had 2 children. My wife was working significantly out of the house. I was traveling a lot. I was deploying, and it put a sense of purpose, a sense of, the old 7 habits stuff, and it stayed with me. Equally so, I think one of the other mentors that I'm pleased to be able to reflect on was Dr. Stephen Covey. I ran into the Covey Institute about midway through my career, read the book on 7 habits, and it turned out at the time the Navy was looking to try to bring some external leadership talent into the senior corps of the Navy. And I got selected to be a credentialed facilitator for some of the Covey curriculum. And as part of that, about 12 of us that were selected to go and do a kind of a executive retreat with Dr. Covey. And turned out I was one of the military officers, and many of them were senior civilians in the Department of the Navy. And we ended up going to Sundance, Utah. And the interesting part of this story was the day we got there, it started snowing. And then by the third day, we were snowed in. And so I had 4 or 5 days with Dr. Covey and his senior staff. And to watch him listen and teach and mentor and share was really, really powerful. It came just at the right time in my life. I think one of those expressions that we all have heard used is that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And my career at that point was ready to have a different imprint, a different fingerprint, to use the title of your show, on where I was taking my my leadership life. And years later, I was able to bring him out to the Pacific Fleet and get out and see some captains and ride a submarine and do some other things. So it became a really special relationship. And although it wasn't personal, because he was at that point a real guru, if we could use that term, his impact on me was was pretty profound. In fact, years later, my daughters, I have two daughters, would say, "Daddy, don't covey me." So you can't bring that stuff back to the house.
Yeah. Well, so similarly, we used to, in my house, when my father would start saying certain quotes, we'd be like, "Oh, here goes Zig Ziglar again." My father, my father was a huge Zig Ziglar fan. He used to listen to all his cassette tapes and everything, and he would all of a sudden start firing off some position or philosophy, and we all knew where it came from, and we'd be like, "We know exactly what you're going with this. I heard you listening to it in your car." Yeah, that was
Amen. Yep,
you
I
just
know exactly.
that story about your daughters just brought me back. That was pretty funny. So when you have great mentors and they make an impact on you, and you combine that with the fact that with leadership, how do you pay it forward? And maybe through your own examples of how you pay it forward, for our entrepreneurs that are listening, maybe gives them some thoughts or ideas on how do you in essence become a mentor, a profound mentor for others.
Yeah, I think one of the pieces that is part of my living and loving and learning is leaving a legacy. And that kind of fits into this question you're asking. Well, how do you leave a legacy? And I think a profound statement is that you don't leave a legacy for somebody, you leave a legacy in somebody. And when you can own that, it changes, profoundly changes, to use your word, your relationship. It's not, I'm going to leave my children $bazillion. It's going to leave them learning how to love and learning how to live and learning how to be joyful and learning how to make a difference in other people's lives. And, I want to do it publicly without talking about their names, but, one of my daughters is a chief of staff for a $900 million international health organization, philanthropically. And I have another daughter who's a doctor of nurse practicing in psychiatry, and she has 5 doctors that work for her, and she works internationally as well. That kind of, to see their success is so rewarding. And I think you're probably feeling the same way now as you watch your own family grow, but also your business family grow. It's not so much that you got something done, but that you can feel such a sense of fulfillment to watch other people be successful. Wow.
It is the best, and it gives you a lot of joy. I mean, one of my favorite things is that one of my associates that I hired to work for me, I guess probably 20 years ago, um, you know, is now a multi-million-dollar producer, a member of our board of directors, just an all-around great person, great lawyer, great partner. And, to watch the evolution from, having bounced around at a couple of firms and then finding a home at our firm and having a chance to, take him under my wing during my career has been probably one of the more enjoyable things to watch. And, I'm experiencing it all over again now with another partner who's kind of, years later now on that same track, and all those same things are happening for her. And it's as the title goes, it's fingerprints on success. And that was, I gave a lot of thought to that because I wanted it to be something that applied to a lot of things, but leadership, mentorship, all these things are at the core of what we want to talk about and what our entrepreneurs want to hear about. So Ty, one question I'd really like to also ask you while I have you still on is, what's a hot topic right now that's on your mind that you're spending time thinking about now that you think maybe everybody else should be thinking about?
Yeah, I think the largest focus in leadership consultancy and coaching and mentorship today is the conversation about Generation Z. I think it's misplaced, but it is a large conversation. And that conversation is, well, they don't want to work so hard, or they just want to take time off, or they don't have the same inspiration of. And I think not only is it a hot topic, but it's one that I think can be laid to rest fairly quickly if you go back to the basics of leadership. As I said earlier, my definition is seeing the unique value and worth in every individual so powerfully they see it themselves. That doesn't matter whether they're 20 years old or they're 60 years old. And I think being able to enunciate that and reflect it, being a great coach and a mentor is not, another cubbyism here is you be a light, not a judge, a model, not a critic. Try that and see what happens to the relationships that you're fostering. And I think we top out to say, oh, it's just a Generation Z issue. I know you had Mark Murphy on recently. And, if you take a look at the generational wealth that's being turned over from the baby boom generation, it's trillions of dollars. I don't know what the real number is, but it could be. And, it's not spoon fed. It's using that same sense of personal worth and value of leaving a legacy in them and translating that to their generation. Does that make any sense?
It really does. And I mean, I can look at it personally as well as with clients I have. Some of the most outstanding people that we have working for us that have huge, bright futures and have unbelievable work ethics and dedication to constant, never-ending improvement, and are fit right into that generation. And in talking to a lot of my clients, I get those phone calls where a client will say, we've got this star that we want to put on a track to have an opportunity to have some equity in the company. And, inevitably they'll be from that generation and they're the rising star and they're doing all the right things. So I think, to your point, it's a real, I think you used the word cop out or whatever, when people just kind of put a definition on an entire group of people and write them off, or, it's maybe for lack of the effort to lead and mentor and teach and create opportunity and model the right behavior and see what happens.
Well, here's another one that I think, and I get involved in the consultancy side, but more on the mentoring side. It's that, that we have this tendency to say great leaders work smarter, not harder. And I'd like to share with you that in my 50 years of being in business, I have never met a successful entrepreneur that doesn't, one, work smarter, and two, work so much damn harder than anybody else around him. It's not either or. You work smarter and you work harder. And that's what is the key to a successful, a small business, a big business. I mean, one of my Navy assignments, I had 6 ships, 3 aircraft all around the world I was responsible for, So yeah, was I flying a lot? Was I away from family a lot? Which also gets to another point, and I want to make it publicly, and that is none of us is successful on our own. I have been blessed to take this journey with a wife and a partner for 46 years now, who has been there for me at every turn. When you're gone for 6 months or 8 months or 9 months, it's not about just having somebody home doing the laundry. I missed my first daughter's words, her first steps, her first school. Back to sea stories, but interestingly, I came home after a 9-month deployment, sitting in the family room next to the kitchen with my wife, who was cooking dinner, and my daughter's kind of now a toddler. She wasn't when I left, and my wife says, "Go be with your daddy." And so she leaves her mom, who she'd been clinging to her thigh, walks over to the refrigerator, and gives my picture a kiss. You want to talk about the kind of tear your heart out moment. about what military service really is and how our families are such a part of it. I wouldn't be near as successful as I've been without my bride. And frankly, I'm learning from my two daughters now. So maybe it's pay it back. Maybe the question should have been pay it backwards. I'm getting paid backwards here too.
Well, you hit a whole bunch of things right there, starting with the working hard part, by the way. 100% every entrepreneur, leader, you name it, who's wildly successful, not one person says their story without talking about hard work and how the hard work never got less. In fact, if anything, as their success grew, they worked even harder. And I think that you may work smarter, but it doesn't mean you're working less. And by the way, if you're doing purposeful work and you love what you do, it's okay. It's okay. Like people think it's a sin to say that there's joy in what they're doing, and there's nothing wrong with that. And none of us can accomplish the things we do or the success that we have without great people backing us up, whether it's a spouse, a family member, key people in your organization, a trusted advisor. There's no entrepreneur that I know sitting in a room by themselves saying, I did it all, and I did it all by myself, and I have no one to thank but me, and everyone, and there was nobody backing me up, and no one that helped me on my journey. Boy, am I terrific! No, I don't. I don't think there's anyone sitting in a room doing that. At least none of the ones I know. Um, so let me finish with this. This one last question for you. I know that you've had now three different careers, right? You've had a life of military service, then huge leadership positions inside publicly traded companies, and now helping people all over the world, consulting and teaching about leadership and business and success. So, and you're going strong still. So what is the why, Captain Ty Aldinger? What is the why behind what you do and why you keep doing it?
I'm a real fan of personal mission statements. You may have even attended a session I was doing one on not too long ago.
I did, and I wrote everything down, and I have one myself.
And a portion of my personal mission statement is to live and lead others to lives of significance. And that hasn't changed. Yeah, I'll review my mission statement routinely, but that piece of it hasn't changed since I originally crafted and drafted it. And there's a lot embedded in that. First is live a life of significance, having nothing to do with anybody else. Live a life of significance. Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, you've got to define that for yourself. But it for me, there means to be impactful beyond my body, and then to lead others to their lives of significance. And great coaches and great mentors are. We are not. We're not there to tell you how to lead your life. We're there to hold up a powerful, omnipresent mirror and say, "Hey, Bill, how's it look today?" And not the kind of funhouse mirror that makes the skinny look fat and the fat look skinny and the tall look short and the short look tall. The kind of mirror that really reflects to say, this is what your life looks like right now. Are you okay with that? I'm not judging it. Not good, not bad, not otherwise. Are you okay with that? And if not, how can I help? How can I be a part of your journey? Not you be a part of mine, not you listen to me. How can I be a part of your journey? What a rewarding trip. We have a mutual friend who says, it's not work, it's not play, it's just how I live.
That's right.
And he's right. He's right. And to answer your question directly, to lead others to lives of significance, not my significance, their significance. Wow. It's just, I can't wait to get up every day. I'm reading a lot. I'm writing a lot. I'm doing an ebook for Fortune Management. I'm continuing to, my latest Covey book is Sean Covey's book, or Michael's M.R. Covey's book on Trust and Inspire, which gets to this point, by the way, of the younger generation. It's not about positional leadership. It's how do you trust? How do you create trust? And how do you inspire? Not come to work and do what I said. How do I inspire you so that you want to be at work and do the things that make a difference in your life? Make sense?
It makes great sense. Well, Captain Ty Aldinger, first of all, thank you for your service. And for me, especially, thank you for everything that you do and for being on Fingerprints and Success, where I couldn't think of a better guest. And I really thank you for being on today.
It's my honor, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Ty.